Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the February 5th school committee meeting here at the Colbert School to order. Moving right into the agenda, public comments. I don't see anyone in the room that has any public comments. Is there anybody online?
There is nobody online.
Online. Okay, moving right in to routine matters. Approval of open session minutes from January 22nd, 2024. Have a motion.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion by Dr. Horak,
Second.
second by Ms. Tuffy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Moving right into communications accommodations, Mr. Lee.
Madam Chair, I only have a couple this evening. One is just to make folks aware that this week is senior night for all of our winter sports teams. So if you want to go honor our senior athletes, you can pick a night. There's a game pretty much every single evening, and you can go and watch them and their parents be recognized at those events. The other accommodation would just simply be for the community itself in terms of the Luna Festival that was held at Braintree High School over the weekend. From our perspective, it was a great success. I'm happy to host it, but for the community, I think it's a wonderful event. Just wanted to acknowledge the fact that it happened.
Any comments or things from the committee?
I will just second, the Lunar New Year Festival at the high school this weekend was an amazing event that I know a lot of the students had the ability to participate in and actually help organize. And it was top notch. So kudos to anyone who had a role in that. I had a fantastic time performing this ceremony for one of the dragons. So it was really cool. And so really, really proud of the groups that pulled that off. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving right into gifts to schools. Again, I'll read all the gifts and ask for one motion. Bay State Textiles, gifts to schools, 5 checks totaling $362.70. South Middle School gifts to schools, $10,150. One deposit in the amount of $7,260. South Middle School ski trips, one deposit in the amount of $2,890 for the 7th grade field trips to Chamber Theater. Nelson Chin Memorial Fund, gifts to schools, $6,000. One check in the amount of $6,000 from the Nelson Chin Memorial Fund to be used for families in need of financial assistance for the full-day kindergarten program tuition. Braintree High School National Art Honor Society, $175 from the National Art Honor Society. And then Braintree High School Wrestling Program, gifts to schools, 4 checks totaling $885 to be used towards uniform replacements for the wrestling program. Do I have a motion to accept all gifts?
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Horak and a second by Ms. Tuffy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous. And as always, we are extremely grateful for all those gifts. Back to you, Mr. Lee, administrative updates.
Thank you very much. I have a couple this evening. I'll get to in a second. Just to update you, we've been discussing kindergarten registrations at our last several meetings. These are the most current numbers that actually come from today. This puts us on track for where we are this year in terms of next year. So we're running about the same numbers at this point. As you can see, we've got 312 kids who have registered, of which 294 a full day and 18 in the half-day program. So we'll continue to update these numbers and bring them back to you, but we are trending almost identically as we did coming into this school year. And these are the numbers again as of today. So I don't know if anybody had any questions about it, but happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Very good. The other piece relates to kindergarten. So the Early Education Center, the Old South building, just to update you in terms of where we are. Facilities has been in the building all year long. As I believe you all know, there was an asbestos abatement that needed to be done. The second floor is completed. The first floor, I believe, is almost completed. They'll move downstairs after that, but they are on schedule and doing well with that. Some decisions that were made along the journey. The first would be about Colbert. At one point, we had discussed moving this whole administrative operation into the basement of Old South. But as we looked at the growing numbers in kindergarten and preschool, just to be cautious about outgrowing the building too quickly, Colbert will not be moving. We'll be staying here which allows us to have more classrooms in the basement of Old South or the early education center. So for that reason, we'll stay put. Intend to hold a Ross kindergarten section to stay at Ross. This would be done because we have a special education program over at Ross from which kids get included into regular ed settings. We don't intend to move the program, so we need some place that they can go to be included with their peers. So we keep one section of kindergarten there to allow for that to occur. Also, it makes a little bit of sense too. Ross is a walking school, so it prevents us from having to introduce transportation over there. Because we are not moving, another part of the conversations that we've had previously was the movement of the launch program that's currently at 74 Pond Street. At one point, we envisioned that program moving into this building. So at this point, that is not going to be an option. And so we'll continue to work on several options for that program and bring them back to you when we have it solidified. But that's where we stand. At this point, we don't see anything that would prevent us from opening on time at the Old South building in September. And we'll look forward to having open houses and opportunities for parents and families to see it prior to the opening. Again, if you have any questions.
Any questions from the committee on the EEC?
I have a question.
Dr. Horak.
So it says Ross kindergarten section, meaning what? But it looked like there were 30 students
Yep.
enrolled in FDK, full day kindergarten for Ross. So does that mean that one class for Ross will be at EEC and one class will be at the homeschool Ross?
We're still determining that. We know we need to keep one there. And what we still need to flesh out is, does it make sense to keep two there at the current numbers? The numbers are still in flux, so we have some time to make some decisions. But understanding the numbers today, we would have a decision to make.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question, a follow-up question on that? If you were to determine just one class, how would you determine what kids stay at Ross and which kids would go to the East?
Unknown is my quick response, because we're not there yet. Part of it in the past, we've actually reached out to families and say, is there a preference? And then based on that, if we had to do some type of lottery, we'd go from that perspective. But that's top of my head thinking.
To be determined.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Question.
Mr. Willow.
Do we have any sense so like if administration were to move and then launch comes in here and opens up a spot at Pond Street, like, do we have a sense for what we're losing revenue wise from like renting out? Because we would open a space.
We would open a space. 74 Pond Street is occupied by several entities,
Yeah.
of which we are one.
Yes.
What that would look like from the town perspective, because it
Yeah.
obviously is a town building. I don't know what their options would be. I could imagine if you could clear the whole building and rent out the entire building, that might look one way. If some of the groups that are there stayed there and you were just renting out certain spaces within the building, to me, that would look another way. So
The launch would be would fill this building.
yes, and this would be actually a very good building for the launch. The launch program is really based on getting kids out into the community, into internships, job site experiences, even Massasoit classes. So they don't stay in the building all day long as a group, so they come and they go.
And is that a definitive plan right now, or is that still open for administration going there if needed to, like the Old South? Like, is that
That's definitive. The worst thing for us would be to open the early elementary center with us there and find out we have too many kids and now we need another space for programs. So we prioritize the programs, preschool and kindergarten first, knowing that we have options, right?
Ms. Tuffy.
So, is there space at the high school for administration rather than, that would allow launch to come here or at another school, in another building?
There are a couple buildings that could allow us to move into them. One would be the high school. We're clearing out that wing, but we are still engaged in conversations about what else that space might be used for. Hollis would be another example of a building with space that administration could occupy. Hollis is also an option that could be explored with respect to launch itself. There's ways to make it kind of a separate building within a building. And those are the options we continue to look at this point.
So when you say it's definitive meaning that this building is not gonna move to south.
We had,
But if there's a need to free up 74 Pond, we have options as far as potentially using this building for other purposes.
I mean, the decision that has been made is about Old South and us not moving into that. And that would not be done so that we had room for growth should the programs expand.
And the rest is to be determined, and we'll see
Right.
what comes next. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on EEC? No. Okay, moving into from the school committee, the student representative report. I'd like to go first.
Oh, okay. Okay, so the first thing that happened for all juniors was last week, the guidance counselors came into all of our history classes and did Naviance workshops. If you don't know what Naviance is, it's basically like our way to look at colleges, get teacher recommendations. So as it's halfway through our junior year, I know that it's on pretty much all of my classmates' minds about college and what senior year will look like. So we got pretty much our first in-depth introduction. It went really well, and that's where we're gonna be able to view our GPA, which I know something is a lot of people want to see that. So that happened last week. Secondly, a couple of weeks ago, I wasn't here last meeting to bring this up, but I had a couple of students ask me, GEM, aka Gender Equality Movement, originally it was Girls Empowerment Club, sent out a survey regarding how people who menstruate would feel about having menstrual products in the girls' bathrooms. And I had a lot of people ask me why we didn't have them in the girls' bathrooms and if I could bring it up. I do know that Jem, the president, is striving for that, and it's something that she's really wanted for a long time. I think I can speak for a lot of people who menstruate in the Brinterhead community, that it is something that we all want to feel comfortable and safe, you know, when we are menstruating, to feel supported. So I'm just bringing that up because I think it's something that's important to just, you know, get on the agenda and the minds of you guys. So that is my update.
Thank you.
Just to touch really quickly on Naviance, it's a great tool. I've used it throughout the past year. It's great to look at colleges you've never heard of before and just kind of explore and see like, what is a target school? What is a match school? What is a reach school? What's a safety? And because a lot of those words are subjective to whoever is applying. So great tool. Best of luck with that. And my update is about the American Cancer Society Club. They sold t-shirts over the past couple of weeks to be worn today at school for World Cancer Day. They were purple. That's the color for cancer awareness. So they said Braintree with a purple ribbon in the middle. And then if you didn't buy a t-shirt, students and staff were encouraged to wear purple today. So a lot of purple around Braintree High today.
And then my update sort of echoes off of what Bella said about menstrual products in the bathrooms at the high school, because I know a common argument against that is, well, the nurse's office has them, so you can just go to the nurse's office to get them. However, many people might not know that it's actually really hard to go to the nurse's office during the day because they won't let you in unless you have a pass from a teacher. And then you have to explain to your teacher why you need to go to the nurse. And it's just an embarrassing process. So I think what you said about having menstrual products in the bathroom is something that we should be looking into as a school district, not just in the high school, but also in the middle schools and possibly the elementary school, to make all students feel safer and not like it's a burden or, you know, a health problem having to go to the nurse every time for that, because they also only let so many kids into the office at once. And then I'd also just like to quickly add something about the state of the bathrooms themselves at the high school. They've always been a problem, smoking, vaping in the bathroom. However, there are some other more recent concerns with them. A lot of kids congregate in the bathrooms, and cell phone policy has definitely helped with kids feeling more comfortable in the bathrooms, not being videotaped or anything like that. But it's more so the structural concerns. A lot of the stalls don't lock, and so you have to hold it and it's uncomfortable. And then there aren't trash cans in some of the girls' bathrooms, and that's something we need in there in each of the stalls. There is no soap dispensers in the boys,
There's only like, I think like the 2 or 3 bathrooms for the boys open right now, because the other ones like keep getting destroyed.
Yeah, they're getting destroyed by students or they have other problems like that. And so I think this is probably one of the main concerns that the students want to focus on because we're also missing a lot of class time because of this. I'll end up going to 3 or 4 different bathrooms just to find one that's open. And so I'm missing 10 minutes or so of class time, and then I don't want my teacher to think that I'm just walking around the hallway a bunch of times. So I think if this is something that the school committee can help EHS and the middle schools kind of deal with in the future, that would be incredible for just students to be able to focus more in school, do what they need to do, come back to class ready to learn. So.
Great. Thank you. Any questions or Stuffy?
Thank you. So, Ms. Pierce from, who's one of the, co-advisors of the Girls Empowerment Club, has reached out and, is going to be on our agenda for February 27th, so of policy and education, so we can discuss the menstrual products in the girls' room at the high school and as well. More thoroughly, and if any of you would like to come along to that meeting to be more specific about what would be helpful, I think that would be a good idea. So that's February 27th at 6:30.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments, Phil?
I have a question.
Oh,
The program and Nambient, the mention, is that a computer or online program that the school provides?
Yeah, through the guidance department, students are provided with an Naviance account. And so as has been described, it's a research tool for all the colleges that you can imagine in the country. You can filter it by a variety of different pieces like size, majors, expense. So for not only kids, but also for some families, it's a great opportunity to kind of understand a little bit more about schools that are not local and you haven't visited, but you might be interested down the road.
Is that like a paid subscription that the school covers for the
Yes.
students?
As a parent, I used it. It was extremely helpful when my kids were looking for colleges for the same things. Instead of reach school, can we afford it? Even like the standards to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you figure out whether or not you think you can, it would be a reach school for you, or it would be, what do they call it?
Like targets,
Target
matches,
match.
they have like scattered,
Safety.
they've scattered
Different
across,
categories.
like, people that have applied from BHS in the past 5 years, who got in, who didn't.
Exactly.
Kind of things.
It's a lot of good information. It's a great tool, so I would agree, so.
It's also a career exploration component to it, so thinking about what you want to do.
Yeah.
It also lets you build your own resume. So it has different sections on like awards, education, extracurriculars. And it's sort of like a format so that students who aren't familiar with applying for a job, they can also get resources for that on Naviance. So it's all around great tool.
And use that resume as well for some of your college applications.
Yeah.
That's the one I
Way to organize it all and
Mhm.
get it into one document. Yeah.
It gives you like personality tests too that you can take. So it says like you're these traits and then it'll match you with careers. Like if you aren't necessarily looking into going to a college, they have so many options for people looking going into the military or union work as well.
Excellent. Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you all for your reports. Okay, moving on to Policy and Education Subcommittee. I'll turn it over to you, Ms. Tuffy.
So Policy and Education Subcommittee voted to move the process to name the Early Learning Center to the full subcommittee, to the full committee. Tonight, we want to initiate that process to rename the Old South Middle School as an Early Learning Center. We have a Braintree Policy FF as a guide, and that mandates that we describe the procedure at a school committee meeting. So as for how to submission of a name for consideration must be made in writing to the school committee chair by email. That would be lisa.fiskheger@braintreeschools.org, or you can send it regular mail, Lisa Fiskheger, Chair Braintree School Committee, 348 Pond Street, Braintree, Mass. As far as who can submit a name for consideration, any Braintree resident is welcome to submit a name. The superintendent can submit a name. If a name is being initiated at the local school level, the principal should include the school council and the PTO in the nomination process. I think we need to determine the when, maybe tonight. We need to determine the date when all submissions are due. And then after that, we would schedule a public hearing to allow for public comment. After the public hearing, the school committee deliberates and votes on a name. And finally, there are some caveats when you're considering a name for the school. If you are, if your choice is an individual, it can be no sooner than 5 years from the end of their service to the community. In the case of a deceased individual, a full 5-year waiting period is required from the time of death. The proposal submission will detail in writing the contributions to society and to the Braintree Public Schools in particular, that the individual has made. And finally, an offer of financial contribution to the school district may accompany the naming request, but the school committee is not obligated to accept or reject a name based on financial considerations alone. So we have a few things that we need to decide as read timeline.
A consideration period, right?
Yeah.
So if we're opening up today, is 30 days, does people think 30 days is,
I think that would be sufficient.
so March 4th or March 5th would be our deadline, so we'll do a 30-day deadline.
That would be the day we have our public hearing.
We are not meeting on the March 4th, we're meeting on March 11th. There's a change in the schedule I was going to mention at the end of the meeting, but so if we could get all of the submissions in by March 4th, we could talk about it at the March 11th.
Okay.
Okay. Does 30 days sound reasonable to everybody to get them in? I know that Fred's here from the Patriot Ledger. I know that he put, I already put an article from our, from your policy meeting last week. So it's already out in the community. I've already seen some postings on social media
And
and
we got a call today at Colbert,
there's some discussion about it. Yeah.
information on how to
Submit
his name.
Okay.
Um,
The other thing we
would-
need to consider.
Would we vote on the same day as the public hearing, like we, or the next meeting,
I wouldn't think so.
the next meeting?
I would think we would collect the submissions. We would talk about them on the 11th. And then we would take a vote at a later school committee meeting.
Sounds good to me. So
So the 4th would be the deadline for the submissions for the letters to me, whether it's through snail mail or through email, whichever. But I need to receive them by the 4th of March. And then on the 11th, will
be the hearing and the public
be
comment.
the public comment. People can come forward and talk about why they've nominated whomever they've nominated. And then we'll take up a vote. We can decide at that point whether we want to do it on the 18th or the 25th. Does that sound reasonable?
If I may, through the chair, I have a comment. So let's say we had 10 nominations, how do we sort of filter that down to a vote?
Do you have a comment for that or do you?
Well, in some schools, they'll send out like a survey and then narrow the selection down based on that. Does that sound feasible or?
Certainly feasible.
Right.
It's got to push your timeline, I think. But we, through Parent Square, we can create surveys and send them out to at least all the school families. It's a little bit more difficult reaching just town folk, because we don't have the access, but maybe that's something
We
we
can work.
talk about.
Their town listserv.
Do what?
Is there like a townwide listserv or something?
There's a reverse 911. It's more about the functionality of the survey.
We do have some ability to, we can look into it and share, yeah.
I just wanted to also stress that I know that Ms. Tuffy covered this, but the proposal that comes to me will detail in writing the contributions to society and specifically to the Braintree Public Schools in particular that the individual has made. So if we have 10 submissions, yeah, the real question is, do we ask the public or do we as a committee decide which ones to move forward?
The decision is the committee's.
Right. So, in the
ultimately
end.
the committee's. And historically, the names of schools have been based on the location of the school or people that were historical figures in colonial Braintree or made some
Contributions
to the
the
town.
schools.
So
I did my research of the 4 schools that we have that are named after people, so. They're either, one was a school committee member and very active in the town, Archie Morrison. Donald Ross he died in action in World War II, and he was a teacher at the time. Mary Flaherty was a teacher, principal at the school. And who am I forgetting? Hollis, of course, Hollis gave land to build the old high school, gave land to build the Penniman School, has a Hollis fund that we still take funds from. So those are the 4 that we have.
The
And then
closed schools
and
as
the right, all the
well,
schools.
Watson School. Thomas Watson started the first kindergarten in Braintree, and of course, he's known for his Alexander Graham Bell partnership. Noah Torrey, that again was a historical figure. There was Lincoln School.
I was gonna say, I don't know that everybody knows all the schools that have closed over the years.
Yep,
Okay.
but
So there may be people that come forward with those nominations as well, based on.
I think it'd be a great thing for people to participate in, and I really look forward to hearing people's ideas.
Absolutely. All right, so again, the deadline will be March 4th to get the letter to me. We'll bring the nominations forward and discuss them on the 11th, and then we'll determine next steps, whether we want to can we ask you or someone at the town hall to look at potentially
Yes,
some
I'll-
kind of a survey?
Yep.
And then we will take it up for a vote by the end of March.
That's good.
Good? Okay, great.
And then next we have a group of policies up for a first reading. These were updates recommended by the Mass Association of School Committees to reflect the expanded use of technology both inside and outside the classroom. So these are first reading. EHE, the use of electronic messaging by school committee members. EHAA, district security relating to technology. EHB, data and records retention. CBEE, personnel use of technology. IJND, access to digital resources. IJNCD, acceptable use of digital resources. JICJ, student use of technology in school. KDC, community use of digital resources. And KDCB, website and social media. If we decide to move these all forward, especially that last one, when in the policy committee, we discussed whether we should delete or add an administrator to the Braintree School Facebook page. That is an inactive public group with 1,036 members. The last post was by Jen Dolan on April 15th, 2021. So if we wanted to discuss any discussion on those issues.
Uh,
Mr. Fogarty.
I just had a question about one of the policies. The personnel use of technology, it has a in that policy, it says that group interactions are encouraged and should include 2 staff members when interacting with students online. One-to-one interactions should be avoided. I just wanted to ask for discussion purposes if it would make sense to make it mandatory to have make at least 2 staff members on any electronic communication as opposed to more just a suggestion or advisory.
If we're talking about email, as I believe you know, we keep all emails and all email communications for 7 years. So we have fewer concerns there because we can always just go to the email and can read through it. In terms of social media itself, in essence, we tell people, do not communicate via this medium. We want you on email. We want to be able to, for your own protection, you want to be able to track your communications with an individual student. So most of the software that we use internally is vetted by our technology department to make sure it's SIPA safe for students. If you want to make it mandatory in terms of a policy, we wouldn't object because we direct people not to do that now.
When, just a follow-up question, do teachers, in recent years, I think text messaging has become even more commonplace. Do teachers really text message with students about questions or anything like that?
No, and one of the reasons we went to Parent Square is a communication, the system is because it allows for that kind of direct communication. But again, we're holding on to all that information. In the past, we had to use software like Remind. Remind was a text piece that prevented you from having to use your actual phone to text me. And we moved away from it because they no longer would store the communications. We're actually looking at some other newer software that would allow for that capability. But most teachers are using Parent Square or Google Classroom to make communications.
Any other questions about any of the policies? I know we have an open question on the Braintree School Committee Facebook page, but any other questions?
Just informationally, we are actually in the process of looking to take it down. It's old, and because it's old, it's tracking down the people who created it, some of whom might live in New Hampshire at this point in time. But as soon as we can get the right access, we'll take it down. And then I think the committee has a decision to make about wanting to start a new one or not. I would not maintain that page regardless. I'd take it down and start over, but.
I would agree with that. It is old and we have other forms of communication that Parent Square and other ways to communicate with people. The agendas and the YouTube links are always posted on the town website and the school website, and that is mostly what was on that Facebook page, so I think that it's a good idea to take it down. So
I would agree. Any other discussion or any other opinions about that? No? Okay, so then let's go ahead and remove that. And the rest of these policies are pretty boilerplate, except for the text in red, correct?
well, they are all except 2 of them are new policies, new to MASC as well as to Braintree. And again, that reflects the changing the way social media and technology is changing. So there is one policy that we looked at, and we're going to look at it in a little more depth on February 7th, because it needs some language updates, but all of these are recommended by MASC.
So this is the first reading. So if
First
anybody has any
reading.
questions between now and our next meeting, we should raise them to the policy.
And so our next meeting is on February 27th at 6:30.
Here in Colbert. Okay. Anything else for policy? Okay, moving on to Finance and Operations Subcommittee update. We also met on February 27th, January 30th, and we will be meeting next on February 27th at 5:30, just prior to Policy and Education. Just a quick overview of what we discussed. We discussed the potential for an FY24 supplemental budget to cover some contractual obligations for special education costs. We talked about the potential, we talked about adding something called RAFD, which is it's a security system, so to speak. It's actually cards for the kids to wear, and you scan them when you get on the bus and when you get off the bus so that we can track kids, you know, all the way up, kindergarten, all the way up. So we talked about potentially implementing that program and the cost incurred for that. ECC update, which we've already talked about, the Early Education Center. The Braintree High School SOI, which we will talk about in a minute with Superintendent Lee. And then we did a very high overview. Ms. Kaufman gave us an overview of the FY24 budget, what that will look like in comparison to the FY24 budget. So with that, we will move to you, Mr. Lee, to talk about the SOI and the budget updates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in your packets, you have a copy of the statement of interest that has been put together for Braintree High School. Up on the board, you can kind of see the time frame we're working under. It has to make 3 stops before we can actually submit it to the MSBA. The first is you as a body. Should it meet with your approval, it would then go to Ways and Means on the town side and then ultimately to the town council. We've reached out to the town just to make them aware that we believe we're going to be coming in March. And then our application deadline is April 12th, 2024. So, this evening, what we'd be looking for is a vote by this body to approve. In essence, all you're voting for is to say that I am allowed to submit the statement of interest. You're not making any testimony about what's in the statement of interest. You're simply giving me permission to submit it. And then the same would be true at the next 2 stops along the route. So again, you have a copy in your packets. In terms of the overall format, it gets plugged into a software program. So we're going to cut and paste all the elements into that. So don't get too hung up in terms of formatting. But if you have any questions about the contents, if you've had a chance to review it, the answer them.
Any questions from the committee about the SOI specifically?
I have
Mr.
a
Rolls.
Can we submit 2 in 1 year?
For core projects,
Yeah.
you can, but you have to state which one's your priority.
Like, have we ever thought about submitting one for an elementary center for the town? Along with a high school?
No is the answer to your question. I would want to have a much more involved conversation about why that may or may not be advantageous.
Yeah.
The high school, after the middle school projects were completed, in essence, they're completed. Those 2 projects were really driven by the elementary level.
Yeah.
In terms of creating space in those schools by moving the 5th grade out. The next priority would be the high school from the perspective that all students go to the high school. And because of the instructional needs of some of the programming that's at the high school, that building's disrepair really kind of harmed us in that regard. I think the committee should engage in a conversation. Should we be invited into a high school project? What would that mean for all the elementary schools? And I'm happy to share some opinions on a conversation like that.
I think the term operational efficiency got brought up at the subcommittee, and we would gain so much more from an elementary school standpoint if we had one town elementary school and would realize the savings, I think.
I mean, part of the conversation nowadays has to really include the town's capacity to support the projects. You don't have to look too far. If you followed the Whittier project up in the northern part of the state, it was a $450 million project. MSBA is good for about 40 cents on the dollar. So regardless of the project, ultimately, it would more than likely require a debt exclusion vote. And if you then wanted to turn around, because that high school needs to be done. And if you wanted to turn around in any type of speedy way to go back for another project, inevitably it's another debt exclusion vote. And you have to walk yourself through the MSBA project process in terms of getting invited in. So, the answer to your question is yes, you can. Strategically, I think I would want to have a bigger conversation.
Mr. Fogarty.
Are there some kind of restrictions on changing the use of the elementary schools based on the fact that some work had been done recently on them?
In terms of the buildings that recently had roofs attached to them, that would be a consideration we'd have to have. If we were going to do something with the MSBA related to some movement at the elementary level, they would have an opinion about the money they've already spent on those particular buildings and would have to factor that into any conversations that we've had. Ultimately, I think it would be really driven by what is your plan longer term, and meeting with the MSBA to clearly articulate what the plan is and why we think it's effective. But they'd want to know where is the money that they've already spent, and how is it going to be utilized? Otherwise, they'd want it back.
Dr. Rick.
I have a question. So on page 34 of our binder on the SOI, the question reads, is this a part of a larger master facilities plan or education plan within the past 5 years? That includes facility goals for this building and all school buildings in this district. And knowing that our town just went through a master plan process within the past year or two, I don't see note of that in the facilities plan date that's listed on our binder. SOI is listed of date of 2014, which is more than 5 years past. So my question is that what happened to the town master plan? Was that not incorporated, or is that not something that the master plan assessed?
The master plan at this point, to my knowledge, does not really include the school building projects that we engage in. The Habib study that was done in 2014 solely focused on the school facilities within the town. So in the master planning process on the town side, we were not, articulating our needs in terms of the individual schools. We were doing that separately through the MSBA based on the Habib study.
So it hasn't been done in 10 years.
The last time the Habib study was done in 2014, correct? And then, through that, the East project, the town got invited into the East building project, which at the time was a simple renovation, right? It turned out to be something completely different, but at the time, that was the piece. Because of the space constraints in the elementary school, the district went back to the MSBA with the town and the mayor's office and said, would you partner with us on a bigger plan that would create space in the elementary schools by removing the 5th grade? And in doing so, the focus could no longer just be on East, it had to be East and South, right? Because you can't pull 5th grades out of one place and not the other. And so just the time frame to get those projects done has been extensive, obviously. East was completed, there was the debt exclusion vote on South, the actual construction of both facilities. So we are still working off the 2014 Habib plan.
Okay. I think that it's worthwhile for the town to consider updating the master facilities plan as it relates to the educational spaces. That's all I wanted to say.
Yep.
Any other questions, comments? No? All right, so there's very specific language that needs to be read in order to move this forward. So I'm going to read it and then I'll ask for a motion in a second. So resolved, having convened in an open meeting on February 5th, 2024, prior to the SOI submission closing date, the school committee of Braintree, in accordance with its charter, bylaws, and ordinances, has voted to authorize the superintendent to submit to the Massachusetts School Building Authority the statement of interest form dated January 18th, 2024 for the Braintree High School located at 128 Town Street, Braintree, Massachusetts, which describes and explains the following deficiencies in the priority categories for which an application may be submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Authority in the future. Priority number 5, replacement, renovation, or modernization of the school facility systems, such as roofs, windows, boilers, heating and ventilation systems, to increase energy conservation and decrease energy-related costs in a school facility. Priority number 7, replacement of or addition to obsolete building in order to provide for a full range of programs consistent with the state and approved local requirements, and hereby further specifically acknowledges that by submitting the statement of interest form, the Massachusetts School Building Authority in no way guarantees the acceptance or the approval of an application, the awarding of a grant or any other funding commitment from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, or commits the town of Braintree or the Braintree School Department to fulfilling an application, to filing an application for funding with the Massachusetts School Building Authority.
So moved.
I have a motion by Dr. Horak, a
Second.
second by Ms. Tuffy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Any opposed? That is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
And this is the sixth time in 6 years that we've submitted it.
Number 6.
Hopefully we'll get some good news. But we won't hear, again, the timeline is April 12th. It needs to be in, and we don't hear until the end of 24, correct?
Yeah, it'll be a while.
Like a December timeline or something. Okay. All right, thank you. And then moving on to the FY25 budget update. Mr.
Thank you. Sorry, I got disconnected there for a second.
Mm.
We are early in this process, and I want to emphasize that completely. As we begin the work, working directly with the mayor's office and the town, we'll refine these numbers, but we need a place to start. And so we start with what we believe we currently need. So the original initial FY25 budget draft that Ms. Kaufman has put together is a $10 million over existing budget, which represents a 13% increase over the FY24 budget. Why this number is so large, you can see up on the screen, contractual increases represent about $6.5 million of that 10 million. Special education, which I think we've talked about quite a bit in these meetings, continues to escalate as far as costs are concerned. So another $1.2 million there. Long-term substitute is a historically underfunded line. This is about right sizing the budget and making sure the numbers represent what our actual spends would be. Transportation is another place where inflation is really having an impact on us, both with fuel and also buses. Typically, we run 3-year leases on our fleet. At the last time that lease expired, it made more sense to renew the lease from a cost perspective. But with that come older buses that require more maintenance, and so those costs go up as well. Athletics, again, inflation, transportation is up, the rental of facilities is up, the official costs are up, that's about another $350,000. And then inflation in general make up the rest of it. So we fully understand that this is a large number. I would tell you that, on the listservs that I'm a part of, this number is not extraordinary related to other communities. A lot of people are looking at increases of this size and scope. But this is where we are today. And I do need to emphasize there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But as a starting point, this is where we are. So just to continue with the thought, get this to work. Some of you have seen this before. Just give me a second. Eliminate some people. These are our students at the elementary level. The green is Flaherty, the yellow is Ross, the dark purple on the right is Morrison, the red is Hollis, purple is Liberty, and light blue is Highlands. We've had this conversation before. As we look at the numbers that we're asking the community to support, I think it'd be irresponsible not to take a look at how we can become more efficient in terms of operating costs. So we are examining these numbers again with no decisions, but just putting it on your radar because it's on our radar. These are our current section sizes in the elementary, just to acclimate you to kind of the format. If you look at the top, Flaherty grade 1 has 3 classrooms. One has 18 kids in it, the other has 17, the third has 17. And as you move across, you can see that. So in grade 2, there are 4 sections of Flaherty. And moving down, you can see each school. What you can see is, as Mr. Rollo indicated, is operational inefficiency. And so, as we roll forward a number that is 13% above our existing, We need to be at least cognizant of what our options could be were it necessary not to have a number that large that the community could support. So, one of the things that we discussed last year, again, just putting it back on your radar, this does not mean we're doing anything. I just want to make people aware of where we begin to look. These were numbers from September of this present year, September 2023. You can see if I just go down grade 1, it's the third column. And if I just go straight down and add them all up, it's 327 kids. Presently, if we divided them into classes of 20, we'd only need a little over 16 classes. Right now, we have 22. So this is where efficiencies can be realized, depending upon what the budget overall looks like. This work is relatively simplistic as it's presented to you this evening. But I didn't want to throw out a massive number without any hope of looking at some options that might exist. So I'm just putting it out there. So Ms. Kaufman and Ms. Vanazar and the rest of our staff will continue to try to refine our numbers. Again, working collaboratively with the mayor's office in the hopes that we can come up with something that works for all sides. Any questions?
Any questions from Mr. Fogarty?
One question I had is about the $1.2 million for new positions in special education.
Mhm.
What type of new positions were created? What's driving the need to create new positions?
IEPs, so an IEP is a contract with the school district and a family. And within that IEP, we identify certain services that need to be provided to that student. Typically, there are a couple of ways we can provide them. We can do it internally, meaning within the district, or if the needs are extraordinary, we look at out-of-district placements. So by providing the services in district, although there's a cost associated with it, typically it's less expensive than an out-of-district placement. And so making and ensuring that the right services are being provided, again, we look to be efficient by doing as many things in-house as we possibly can.
So the new positions teaching and paraprofessional positions?
That's what it is.
And does Braintree Schools use like special ed coordinators to manage like IEP meetings and write IEPs?
We don't have them at the elementary level. We do have them at the middle and the high school level.
I did have another question, a slightly different topic, just in terms of consolidating elementary schools or classes for efficiency, other than putting is there some way to do that other than just putting elementary schools into a different building? We're combining elementary schools. Is that sort of the option that you're getting at, or is there some?
No, in essence, what I'm presenting really relates to redistricting. So if I were to look at, for instance, and I'm not going to pick on a school, but I'm going to pick on a school just for the sake of making a point. If I go down grade 1, bottom of the screen in Ross, there are 3 classrooms. One's got 12 in it, one's got 13 in it, one's got 13 in it. Those are inefficient numbers, right? But it's almost impossible to add them together and have just 2, because now the class is too big. So I could look at those Liberty numbers, and this is just an exercise. It's not what I do. But I could look at those Liberty numbers and I could say, well, I can move some kids out of Liberty and put them into Ross, right? And balance class sizes out to a point where you begin to realize efficiencies.
Would that decision have to be made every year in order to make it redistrict?
Not every year, but
Are there enough patterns that you can sort of redistrict and predict that it would be more efficient?
Over time, no. The neighborhoods get hot, neighborhoods go cold. Typically I would think redistricting, depending upon the scale at which you did it, is probably good for about 10 years max before you'd have to consider doing it again. The last redistricting in this town goes way back, and it's been, I believe, 20 years since it's been done. But it is one way to become more efficient without consolidating the schools themselves.
Anything else, Mr. Fogarty?
No, thanks.
Correct.
10 million is a lot of money. And currently the Braintree doesn't have the funds for maintenance of effort. It's clear, right? It would be cost an extra $10 million from the town. The projections that I've seen is that the new revenue from the town is somewhere in the order of a couple $100,000. So we don't have nearly enough projection of growth to cover these rising expenses that are in education that we have to contractually, we're obligated. We need to deliver on these. In fiscal year 24, the mayor used I think it was 4.3 million in free cash to continue maintenance of effort and avoid big changes. You proposed as a hypothetical solution to address an inefficiency in grade 1. I have 2 grade 1 children now that, right now you have 22 sections of first grade. And if you do some math, you could redistrict and go to 16 sections, and that's 6 teachers cut. What cuts are we going to have to make in the school system in order to balance this budget of $10 million?
I don't know yet, because I don't know what the town can support. If I assume that the 10 million is the worst case scenario, the question becomes, how close can we get? And that number will drive conversations about what can we do that has the least impact on students' education and experience, but still maintains our obligations as you described them in a way that we're comfortable with. Again, if you look across the state right now, these are the conversations that many school committees are having. And it's our turn. We need to have these very difficult conversations and find solutions to the problem. But without a target, I can't give you a definitive answer. As that picture becomes clearer on the town side and we get more direction, then I can give you more concrete examples of what we could do.
If I remember from our discussions last year, during the budget discussions at the school committee meeting, a redistricting effort would save on the order of $1 million. That doesn't get us very far.
Every little bit helps.
I'm very concerned.
So am I.
Yeah. Okay.
Ms. Duffy?
So it's my understanding that free cash hasn't been certified yet, so
I can speak to that. Free cash was certified last week. So we do have that certification. Rough, off the top of my head, it was close to 11.9, around 11.9 certified as of last week.
okay, 11,900,000.
And Mr. Hooper?
I just wanted another question, if redistricting took place and you're limiting the number of first grade classes to 16, I think someone mentioned that teachers' positions would be cut. Would those teachers be moved to other positions within the school district? Or?
No, and just to be clear, I'm not suggesting this evening that we're cutting any first grade sections.
I understand that.
It's an exercise.
Hypothetically, yeah.
But not hypothetically, if you need to save money, 84% of our budget is people. And there's no way around that. So we can talk about fees and we can talk about some other things that we could do, but the preponderance of where we spend money is on staff. And so, if the circumstances dictate, it is reductions in staff that get you closer to the number you might need to meet. I'm not saying that's what we want to be doing. It's not a conversation I'm looking forward to at all, but that's where the money is. And so depending upon ultimately what the target is, we'll have conversations about how do we get to that number with the minimum impact to students.
As well.
Mr. Rillo?
Are we using like state averages and stuff for, like, how are we determining a district goal for classroom sizes, right? If we were looking at, we really need to be below this number, are we looking at state averages or what, like? Other internal numbers that
We can look at comps in terms of class sizes. But what I would say to you in this moment is I just reading through emails from every superintendent that I know of, all the numbers I'm going to give you are not really going to be accurate at the end of the budget cycle of most of these communities. I thought I was out of my mind coming in here with a 13. I've seen more than that today in terms of what other communities are looking at. So people have to find the solution to the problem. And part of it is identifying how big is the problem and, and what could we do? And this, it's all coming back. Keep your calendars open in March and April, because we're going to be talking about this ad nauseum. And this is just one example that we had already done some work on, so it's actually relatively easy just to show it to you. It's got to be part of a conversation. Doesn't have to be the answer, but it has to be part of the conversation. And to the best of our ability, we'll keep identifying exactly what the ideas we have look like and what the savings potentially could be, all working towards a number that works.
It's toughy for a second time.
Is,
The question for,
to the chair, so it's my understanding that maximum class size is contractual, not anymore?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you.
There's guidance about class sizes, nothing's mandatory.
Okay.
I know it,
There's some practical matters that we'll certainly identify as we get into it. You know, we can't have a first grade class of 28 kids, that's just not feasible.
For us, right.
So there's practical considerations that we'll have as we continue conversations.
and Braintree has historically prided itself on small class sizes. So again, it's, you know, a long conversation over the next couple of months. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay, we have a meeting on March 4th on the calendar, which we will not be holding. So our next meeting will be March 11th. And then we also have meetings tentative, I believe, we have on the 18th and the 25th. So I think we should all plan, especially through this budget cycle, that we have meetings on March 11th, March 18th, and March 25th. With that, we have come to the end of our agenda. At this point, we are going to go into executive session. We will not be returning to open meeting. So consideration to enter into an executive session pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A1, to address the personnel issue as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the legal position of the school committee as declared by myself, the chair. I need a roll call vote to go into executive session. So, Mr. Fogarty.
So moved.
Oh, Mayor joins. Dr.
Aye.
Ms.
Aye.
Huffy, Matt, and the chair votes aye. We also adjourn our open meeting. So I get a motion to close the open meeting.
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Horak. Second by
Second.
Ms. Huffy, same thing, executive, excuse me, roll call vote.
Yes. Aye.
Huffy. Chair votes aye. We are adjourned.
So our next meeting is March 11th.
Correct. We're skipping the 4th, but we're gonna
Okay.
meet the 11th.
Wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very curious to see how many letters I get, how many nominations.
Got some emails today.
When you-
I'm sorry?
Today?
Got some emails today.